Karen saw a classic Mustang parked in my garage and decided it was abandoned property, so she tried to tow it without a court order out of a retired judge's house. Bold move, right? She didn't know the HOA she ran had been legally dead for years, or that my daughter's a lawyer with a kill-swip briefcase. By the time Karen finished banging her toy gavel, we were already drafting her indictment. This isn't just petty, this is warfare. And Karen picked the wrong neighborhood. They say retirement is peaceful. That's the lie I bought into when I moved to Willow Creek Reserve, a gated slice of suburban heaven just outside Cherry Hill, New Jersey. After 35 years of settling legal disputes as a state judge, I figured I'd spend the rest of my life tending tomatoes, walking my dog, and maybe yelling at a few squirrels for sport. What I didn't expect was being declared a criminal by the self-appointed dictator of the HOA over a birthday gift I gave my daughter. The gift in question, a 1969 Ford Mustang Fastback Cherry Red, restored by my own two hands across 4 winters in my garage. I gave it to Lily the week before she flew to Seattle to start her PhD program. She cried. I cried. It was a good day. I promised I'd keep it safe while she was away. Safe meant locked inside my garage. Turns out, Karen, the HOA president with a God complex, had other plans. The first knock came at 6:45 a.m. on a Tuesday. The sun wasn't up, my coffee wasn't brewed, and there she stood. Short blonde bob, crisp white polo shirt embroidered in golden letters, khakis ironed with military precision, clipboard held like a holy relic. Mr. Blake. She chirped without smiling, flipping open her notes. Per Willow Creek Regulation 39C, no vehicle may remain stationary for more than 72 hours. Your red Mustang has exceeded 96. I blinked. It's in my garage. She nodded solemnly like I'd confessed to murder. Exactly. Hidden storage creates suspicion, not to mention rodent risk. Do you know what happens when raccoons take up residence in a carburetor? I was too stunned to answer. I invited her in, not out of politeness, but because I didn't want the neighbors watching. HOA Theater, Season 8, Episode 1. I poured her a cup of coffee, black, no cream, because her aura screamed lactose intolerance, and sat across from her at the kitchen table. Karen, I said slowly, that's my daughter's car. She's away at school. It's not abandoned, it's stored. She didn't flinch. Regulation 39C makes no exception for sentimentality. You could be storing a blimp for all I care. Rules are rules. She pushed a printed notice toward me. You have 7 days to move the vehicle or pay a $250 0 cents violation fee. Late fees will apply. Repeated noncompliance may result in HOA disciplinary review and potential lien placement. I examined the paper. The regulation she cited looked off. Different font, different spacing, like it had been photoshopped by someone who thought Comic Sans was intimidating. I pointed this out. Her smile thinned, like a balloon slowly leaking air. That's irrelevant. We have streamlined formatting recently. It's about clarity. She stood up fast, her chair screeching. You may be new here, Mr. Blake, but this community values order. Compliance is what keeps our property values safe. Rebellion isn't part of the lifestyle we promote. As she walked to the door, she tossed back one final gem. Garage violations have been linked to neighborhood decline. Just last year, a poorly managed shed led to a raccoon incident in Sector 5. I was still trying to understand what Sector 5 meant when the door closed behind her. I looked down at the fine again, then at the Mustang, and then at the coffee that had gone cold during our HO. A week ago, I was planting basil and fixing my fence. Now, I was apparently a rodent harborer and enemy of the community, all because I tried to keep a gift safe for my daughter. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. But inside, a switch flipped, one I hadn't touched since my courtroom days. They thought I'd fold. They thought I'd pay the fine and be done. What they didn't know was I'd spent decades watching people like Karen crumple under actual legal pressure. This wasn't about a car. It was about power. And I had far more experience with that game than she ever would. She just didn't know it yet. By the time the coffee kicked in, I had already read Regulation 39C 3 times, twice in the HOA welcome packet and once online. Spoiler, it didn't exist, or at least not any official document I could find. What did exist was a vague section about non-functional vehicles stored in plain sight, but even that didn't apply to my garage-parked fully registered Mustang. Karen wasn't enforcing rules. She was inventing them like a kid playing Monopoly with their own house rules taped over the board. So I did what any retired judge with time, curiosity, and a healthy hatred of paperwork abuse would do. I started digging. I reviewed every document from my closing papers, including a digital copy of the HOA's publicly filed bylaws. That's when I noticed a pattern. Sections like 39C and 44B only appeared on Karen's notices, never in official filings. Her laws were less HOA policy and more HOA fan fiction. At precisely 9:00 IMing, I responded to her notice with a politely worded email. Dear Mrs. Williams, I wrote, in reviewing your citation of Regulation 39C, I was unable to locate this rule in the Willow Creek HOA's publicly recorded bylaws or amendment register. Please provide the original adoption record, meeting minutes, and vote count for this regulation, as well as legal authority granting enforcement of parking infractions on. I CC'd the entire HOA board, 7 members, most of whom had names I only recognized from awkward small talk over 4th of July sangria. 10 minutes later, her reply arrived like a flaming spear hurled from Mount Olympus. Mr. Blake, she snapped, residents are not entitled to review internal governance protocols unless granted board status. Continued noncompliance will be documented as active obstruction. Fines will accrue daily at a rate of $50, 0 cents. No sincerely, no salutation, just the HOA equivalent of a middle finger. I'd seen more diplomacy and parking tickets from mall cops. Her attachment included a chart titled Ongoing Violation Tracker, listing my supposed offenses, garage storage day 4, insubordination day 1, and my personal favorite, community undermining. I almost wanted to frame it. I responded again, this time attaching screenshots of the New Jersey HOA Governors Act and highlighting residents' rights to review policy enforcement documentation. I even added a light closer. If there's been a clerical oversight, I'm happy to assist in clarifying the matter. You'd think I threatened to sue her dog. 2 hours later, a new email appeared, subject line in all caps. Urgent HOA violation response required activated. The body read like a cease and desist letter. There were references to neighborhood destabilization, safety concerns, and a line that honestly made me laugh out loud. Uncooperative residents erode the moral fabric of Willow Creek. That weekend, Karen upped the ante. Saturday morning, I opened my blinds to see her holding what looked like a community church sermon on the sidewalk in front of my home. She had a fold-out table, a speaker, a megaphone, and a banner that read, Protect our property values, say no to non-compliance. About 15 residents stood around sipping coffee, half looking bored, the other half looking cornered. I stood behind my curtains and watched as she dramatically pointed at my garage like it was a crime scene. She used words like hazard, precedent, and urban decay. I half expected her to yell, think of the children, but I suppose that was being saved for the sequel. Her delivery was part HOA policy, part daytime soap opera. Every now and then, one of my neighbors would glance nervously at my windows, like looking directly at me might summon a lawsuit. The whole thing was absurd. But Karen wasn't trying to convince me. She was trying to isolate me. By Sunday at work, people who used to wave now avoided eye contact. I said good morning to Mrs. Patterson, who used to bake me lemon bars every 2 weeks, and she literally turned around mid-walk. At the grocery store, I overheard someone whisper, he's the one defying Karen, like I was a cult leader planning to repaint the HOA fountain in glitter. At that moment, I realized I wasn't just up against one woman, I was up against a regime. And regimes don't fall with logic, they fall with leverage, which is exactly what I plan to gather next. And as fate would have it, Monday brought the perfect opportunity on 4 wheels with flashing lights and a tow hook. By Monday afternoon, the isolation campaign had reached full swing. My mailbox was stuffed with anonymous flyers titled Understanding HOA Compliance, Why It Matters, complete with clip art of exploding trash bins and wild raccoons. Karen's narrative had gone from garage violation to Richard Blake neighborhood threat level orange. I'd seen cult leaders with subtler PR. But she wasn't done. At 6:15 p.m., as I was grilling a flank steak and trying to pretend the world hadn't gone HOA mad, I heard a loud mechanical groan from the front of my house. I peeked through the side gate, and there it was, a tow truck, reversing up my driveway like it was reclaiming a repo lot. And there, directing it with hand gestures and righteous fury, was Karen. I walked around front, still holding my grilling tongs, apron on, steak half seared. The driver, mid-40s S, tattoos, Bluetooth headset, looked confused. You Richard? He asked. I nodded. She says it's abandoned. I'm just here to do my job. I turned to Karen, who was vibrating with HOA adrenaline. Mrs. Williams, I said calmly but firmly, this vehicle is fully registered, insured, and parked on private property. Unless you have a court order, this is attempted theft. She didn't flinch. The HOA has authority to enforce community standards. You've had multiple warnings. This is a lawful action under Emergency Clause 12B. Emergency Clause 12B sounded less like a law and more like something she made up while watching reruns of Law and Order. I looked at the driver. If you hook that car, you'll be liable for civil damages. And I don't mean small claims court. I mean the kind of court with marble columns. He paused, looked at Karen, then back at me. You a lawyer or something? I smiled. Better. Retired judge. The silence that followed was glorious. The driver muttered something about not being paid enough for this HOA crap and hopped back in his truck. He reversed down the driveway, leaving Karen standing mid-command like someone had hit pause on a bad courtroom drama. But Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat, not without dragging someone else into it. 10 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up. Out stepped Officer Marcus Delgado, a name I recognized. He was the son of an old colleague of mine, and I'd overseen the trial where he gave his first ever courtroom testimony. Karen charged toward him like a prosecutor on Red Bull. Officer, that man interfered with HOA enforcement, threatened a city contractor, and obstructed an ongoing compliance action. I demand immediate action. Marcus turned to me, eyes narrowing with a flicker of recognition. Mr. Blake, you're Judge Blake. I nodded. He relaxed visibly. Evening, sir. What's going on? I explained the situation in 30 seconds flat. Marcus turned back to Karen, tone shifting from neutral to professional steel. Ma'am, unless you have a court order or documented authority to seize private property, this isn't enforceable. HOA rules do not override state law. You'd need civil process. We're not here to play referee on parking disputes. Karen looked like someone just told her Santa Claus got audited. She turned red, then purple, then a concerning shade of ash gray. This isn't over, she hissed. You're making a mistake siding with him. I run this community. Marcus didn't even blink. You run a volunteer committee, ma'am. Let's keep that in perspective. She stood frozen, fists clenched as he got back in his cruiser and gave me a small nod before driving off. I stood there on the lawn, steak now well past medium rare, wondering if I'd just experienced HOA warfare or local theater. Either way, I knew Karen would not retreat quietly. She'd lost a battle, but in her mind, she was still queen of the cul-de-sac. What I didn't expect was how far she'd go next, because 3 days later, I got a knock at the door, and this time she brought papers, a smug grin, and what looked like a legal summons. Karen wasn't just fighting a parking issue anymore. She was trying to put me on trial. Thursday evening, just as the sun dipped below the manicured rooftops of Willow Creek, I opened the front door to find Karen standing there like a villainous wedding planner. She wore a blazer far too formal for suburbia, held a padded envelope with both hands like it was a royal decree, and smiled like she'd already won. Mr. Blake, she said, drawing out each syllable like a judge announcing a sentence, you are hereby summoned to appear before the Willow Creek Reserve Homeowners Association Board of Directors for a disciplinary hearing regarding repeated and willful violations of community standards. I raised an eyebrow. You're joking. Her smile widened. Failure to attend will result in additional penalties, including but not limited to Linnaean action, legal escalation, and community censure. I took the envelope. It was thick, sealed with a gold foil HOA sticker that looked like it had come from a child's craft bin. Inside was a multi-page document filled with legal-sounding nonsense, multiple signature lines, all in the same handwriting, and, most hilariously, a wooden gavel icon watermark on every page. Karen had watched too many courtroom dramas and thought clip art was due process. The hearing was scheduled for Friday evening in the community clubhouse. I arrived early, mostly out of curiosity, and partly because I wanted to see just how far down the HOA rabbit hole Karen had crawled. What I found was a room that looked like it had been set-dressed for a high school mock trial. A folding table had been placed at the front, behind which sat Karen and her 6 loyal board members, all dressed in matching navy cardigans like some suburban coven. There was a mini American flag on the table, a desk nameplate reading Madam Chairwoman, and a wooden gavel that looked freshly purchased from an online costume shop. About 60 residents filled the plastic chairs. Some held coffees, others looked like they'd been bribed with HOA vouchers for free mulch. Karen banged the gavel with gusto. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "this evening's proceedings will determine whether Mr. Blake's ongoing noncompliance constitutes grounds for enforcement action." I sat in the front row, hands folded, pretending to be impressed by the theater. Lily read from a prepared script accusing me of multiple infractions: unauthorized vehicle storage, refusal to comply with directives, intimidation of HOA representatives, and my personal favorite, undermining community cohesion through legalistic disruption. Apparently, quoting actual state law now counted as terrorism. Her performance was Oscar-worthy. She paused for dramatic effect, raised eyebrows at key moments, and even gestured toward the audience like a lawyer delivering a closing argument on TV. But something was shifting in the room. A few neighbors whispered to each other. A woman in the third row, Mrs. Jenkins, I think, actually rolled her eyes when Karen brought up property value jeopardization. The mood wasn't anger, it was skepticism. They came for drama, but they were starting to smell the farce. Karen finished with a flourish, slamming her gavel. "Mr. Blake," she declared, "do you have anything to say in your defense before we vote?" I stood, adjusted my jacket, and gave her a polite smile. "Yes," I said, "but I won't be defending myself alone." From the back of the room, a figure stepped forward. My daughter, Lily, in a tailored gray suit, briefcase in hand, eyes blazing with controlled fury. She had flown in that morning from Seattle. The audience turned, some gasped. Karen blinked, confused. I nodded. "This is Lily Blake, my legal counsel and a specialist in HOA law. She'll be handling the rebuttal." Karen's face dropped like her Wi-Fi just went out mid-Netflix. Lily opened her briefcase and placed a thick binder on the table. "Before we begin," she said calmly, "we'd like to enter into the record a few documents, starting with the certificate of dissolution filed with the New Jersey Department of State confirming that the Willow Creek HOA has not existed as a legal entity since 2019. Audible gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen froze. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. No sound. I could see the board members shift uncomfortably in their chairs. Lily continued. "What this means is simple. Every fine, every rule, every enforcement action taken since that date has been completely and utterly invalid, including this hearing." And just like that, the gavel on the table wasn't a symbol of authority anymore. It was a prop in a crumbling stage play. Karen didn't know it yet, but her kingdom was already on fire. Karen didn't move. Her gavel hand twitched slightly as if her brain was still buffering. One of the board members, a middle-aged man with a Bluetooth in one ear and visible sweat on his forehead, leaned over to whisper something to her. She waved him off like a mosquito. "This is a mistake," she said, voice strained but defiant. "That certificate is outdated. We renewed our status last year." Lily didn't blink. "No, you attempted to renew it," she replied, sliding forward a printed email from the New Jersey Secretary of State. "But your filing was rejected due to missing documentation. You've been operating without legal standing for 4 years. That makes your authority over residents about as valid as a monopoly banker. The only thing missing was the tiny top hat and plastic houses." The room began to shift. Residents who had been silent now leaned forward. A few took out their phones. One man actually began recording. Karen noticed. "No filming allowed," she snapped. "This is a closed session." Lily raised a hand. "Actually, ma'am, without legal incorporation, this isn't a session at all. It's a social gathering with delusions of grandeur." I watched as the veneer cracked. Karen's confidence, once bulletproof, now had visible fractures. But we weren't done. I stepped forward and placed a second folder on the table. "This," I said calmly, "is a financial audit, pulled from public bank statements and vendor records we obtained under the Freedom of Information Act." Karen's eyes flicked to it like it might bite. The numbers didn't lie. $65,000, 0 cents collected in violation fines over 4 years, only $3,200, 0 cents accounted for in community spending. The rest? Lily flipped through receipts, $8,000, 0 cents on conference travel that matched a Paris hotel booking. $12,400, 0 cents in maintenance, billed to a local auto shop that only serviced luxury imports. $15,000, 0 cents in kitchen upgrades at an address matching Karen's house. Turns out HOA stood for her own amenities, Karen stammered. "Those expenses were authorized. The board approved every dollar." But the board members now looked like they'd just woken up in a Ponzi scheme. One stood up, Susan Myers, secretary of the HOA, and spoke, her voice shaking. Karen, we never saw these. You presented totals, not itemized breakdowns. You said it was all going to new sidewalks and drainage improvements. The room exploded in murmurs. A man in the back stood up and shouted, my wife paid $600, 0 cents, because our shutters were the wrong shade of blue. Where did that go? Another, you fined me for leaving my trash bin out an hour late. Karen tried to shout over him, lies. These are all misinterpretations. You're being manipulated. But no one was listening. I held up one last sheet, an email from Karen to a towing company. Take the Mustang to my lot, hold it until he pays. Make sure he learns what happens when you mess with me. There was her name, her signature, her own words in black and white. It wasn't just illegal, it was personal. Karen lunged for the paper, but Lily slid it out of reach. You've committed at least 3 felonies, she said evenly. Fraud, embezzlement, abuse of power. And that's before we even get to attempted theft. Karen backed up like the table had caught fire. You can't do this, she whispered. I am the president. I shook my head. You were. But right now, you're just a neighbor in a whole lot of trouble. Just then, a voice came from the back of the room. Mrs. Williams, please step aside. Officer Delgado had returned, this time with another officer in tow. The room went still. Karen turned slowly, as if her body knew what her brain refused to accept. No, she said. You don't get to do this here, not in front of everyone. Marcus stepped forward, hand on his belt, calm and professional. Mrs. Williams, based on evidence provided tonight, I'm placing you under arrest for fraud, theft by deception, and impersonation of an official authority. Please place your hands behind your back. And just like that, the gavel hit the floor, not with authority, but with a dull plastic clunk that echoed across a room full of stunned neighbors. Karen didn't speak. For the first time since I met her, she had nothing to say. When the handcuffs clicked around Karen's wrists, the room didn't erupt, it exhaled. A collective silence swept over the clubhouse, not out of shock, but relief. People looked at each other, almost in disbelief, as if the HOA emperor had finally been revealed to have no clothes, no crown, and no legal standing. Officer Delgado read her rights with practiced calm, while Karen stood frozen, blinking like she had stepped out of a dream and straight into an indictment. Turns out, dictatorship runs smoothly until it meets a printing press and a criminal code. As they let her out, someone in the back began a slow clap. It caught on like wildfire, half ironic, half cathartic. The same neighbors who once avoided eye contact with me were now cheering, recording, and even shaking my hand as if I'd just defended the neighborhood from a dragon. One man shouted, "Who's going to refund my shrub fine, Judge?" And the laughter that followed didn't feel bitter. It felt free. Within 24 hours, the story hit the local news. Fake HOA president arrested for embezzlement and fraud, exposed by retired judge and daughter. The headline alone had the tone of a Netflix docuseries waiting to happen. The photo they used, Karen mid-scream, gavel in hand, looking like she was about to sentence the cameraman to death by mulch. The article was brutal. It detailed years of unauthorized fines, the failed incorporation status, the misused funds, the fabricated regulations. They even ran quotes from multiple residents, some relieved, some embarrassed, most furious. David, her husband, filed for divorce 3 days later. He told a reporter, "I knew something was wrong when she started saying things like, 'I control the water pressure.' Her house went dark, mailbox overflowing, the flags she once patrolled with now wilting in her flower beds. The HOA board resigned en masse within the week. By Friday, the same community that once rallied around fear came together with purpose. An emergency town hall was called, not by me, but by a coalition of neighbors. Mrs. Jenkins, the twins from Unit 5B, even grumpy old Bill, who once tried to fine me for using the wrong mailbox flag. They nominated me as interim president by unanimous vote, but I only accepted under one condition. Transparency would no longer be optional. I brought Lily in as pro bono legal counsel. Her first order of business, drafting a real HOA charter, one that couldn't be rewritten by someone with a clipboard and a God complex. We mandated financial audits, rotating leadership, and public voting on every major policy. We even removed the HOA gavel and replaced it with a decorative garden hose, the only thing allowed to apply pressure around here. The changes were immediate. People started repainting their shutters without fear. Block parties resumed. Kids rode their bikes in the cul-de-sac without being reported for reckless pedal use. We turned the old violation board into a community mural. The clubhouse, once a chamber of fines, became a place for movie nights and gardening workshops. It wasn't just cleanup, it was rebirth. Not everyone agreed on paint colors or lawn heights, but for the first time we agreed on something bigger. No one would ever be allowed to weaponize order again. I sat on my porch that Saturday, watching Lily laugh with neighbors around the newly planted communal flower bed. She looked more at home than she had in years. "You sure you don't want to run the HOA yourself?" I asked, sipping coffee. She grinned. "Nah, Dad. You're the neighborhood's justice system. I'm just the appeals court." That's when the first email came in from a nearby community in the same county. Their HOA president had suddenly resigned. They wanted to know if I could come speak at their next meeting. Turns out justice is contagious. By the end of the month, Willow Creek Reserve didn't just look different, it felt different. Gone were the surveillance flyers, the clipboard warnings, the whispers behind hedges. In their place were front yard picnics, chalk drawings on sidewalks, and neighbors who actually waved with both hands. We replaced Karen's patrol routes with rotating kindness systems, a casual check-in system to help elderly residents, or mow a lawn if someone was out of town. No one missed the fines, no one missed the fear. The HOA newsletter went from violations of the month to who baked this banana bread. Karen's trial came faster than expected, with the evidence so meticulously laid out, and her own husband testifying to her misuse of funds. The prosecution had a buffet of charges: fraud, embezzlement, impersonation of an official, attempted theft. She pled not guilty, but her defense crumbled faster than her HOA's and corporation papers. The jury didn't even take a full day. Guilty on all count. The judge, an old colleague of mine, looked almost delighted to finally sentence a neighborhood tyrant. 3 years in prison, 5 years probation, and full restitution. She owed the community $62,000, 0 cents. That's about $1,000, 0 cents for every passive-aggressive flyer she ever taped to someone's door. Her mugshot went viral. Lips pursed, blazer askew, holding a manila folder like it might still save her. Internet commenters did what they do best, dubbed her Karen the community queen pin, turned her into memes, GIFs, and even a Halloween costume. For a week straight, trick-or-treaters rang my doorbell dressed in khakis and fake clipboards yelling, "Garage violation." We laughed, but the lesson stuck. Power unchecked becomes power abused. And HOA Karen had written the handbook on both. Meanwhile, Lily and I received more than thank yous. We got emails, letters, calls from people across the state, some even out of state. Other neighborhoods wanted to know, how did you do it? How do we take back our communities? So we did what any mildly vengeful retired judge and his no-nonsense daughter would do. We started a nonprofit. We called it Civic Roots. Free legal help, template policies, education on HOA rights and limits. And within 6 months, we'd helped a dozen neighborhoods restructure, including one where the HOA president had tried to evict a wheelchair-bound veteran for having a ramp too visible from the street. I told Lily, if this keeps up, you might end up more famous than the Mustang. She smirked. "Dad, that car's iconic. I'm just her lawyer." But she wasn't kidding. The Mustang, still polished, still perfect, became a kind of symbol around here. People started calling it the car that beat Karen. Neighbors left notes on the windshield thanking me for standing up, for not folding, for showing that even small acts of defiance matter when the system gets hijacked by the loudest voice with a fake badge. We didn't just survive a HOA war, we rewrote what the battlefield looked like. Every morning now, I sit on my porch with a mug of black coffee and a view of the Mustang, sunlight hitting the hood like a metal urn. It's not just a car anymore, it's a story. A story about how one woman's obsession with control ran straight into a brick wall of legal knowledge, stubbornness, and one very well-dressed daughter. We didn't win because we shouted loud. We won because we outlasted the nonsense, exposed the lies, and rallied the people who just wanted to plant petunias without fear of being fined. They say justice is blind. Maybe. But in this neighborhood, she drives a cherry red 69 Mustang and parks wherever the hell she wants. So if you've ever been bullied by someone with a clipboard and too much free time, don't fold, don't flinch, stand tall, get the facts, and if needed, bring receipts and a damn good lawyer. And if you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, share it with someone stuck in HOA purgatory, and drop a comment below. What's the wildest thing your HOA ever tried to fine you for? Because around here, we don't just restore classic cars, we restore justice.